Great. Good morning, and welcome to the Wisdom of the Soul class presented by the Ageless Wisdom Mystery School. I'm Michael Benner, and I've lost track of what number this is 34, 35, 36, somewhere in the mid 30s. We'll figure it out when we put this on the YouTube channel, and of course, we do podcast this as well. And just search for Ageless Wisdom Mystery School. Subscribe on YouTube and like and comment if you would. That helps us out. That attracts people. And also the podcast, excuse me, and also the podcast, which you can find on all player apps and aggregators and directories. Again, search Ageless Wisdom Mystery School. Every once in a while, I remember to announce that I do private work. I probably should mention that every week, but I don't. All you have to do is click the round red circle. That's redundant. The red circle. Of course, it's round if it's a circle. On michaelbenner.com or theagelesswisdom.com. And that'll put you into my online calendar, and you can schedule a free intake session. No obligation whatsoever. Just we'll set up a Zoom call or a phone call, FaceTime, whatever you'd like. You can tell me what kind of help you're looking for, and I'll tell you whether I think I can help you, and if so, how. We're talking for the most part about anxiety disorders in personal development, and then that can lead to the overtones of what we mean by spiritual development. And you can do is, again, there's no obligation after the free session. You can do just one formal session after that or more. There's no contracts, nothing locks you in. And I call it the Goldilocks solution because it's much more than life coaching, and yet it's much less intrusive than psychotherapy. Will not take your life apart into little pieces and try to fix anything. It's more a matter of helping healthy, happy people kick in the afterburners and accelerate your growth and amplify your happiness and well-being. And we call that personal development strategies. And again, just go to michaelbenner.com. You see a red circle, click on that to go to the calendar, the scheduler, or the podcast homepage, The Ageless Wisdom. The THE is part of it, theagelesswisdom.com. And we do have openings. I'd love to add you to the schedule. Today we're going to talk about a classic experiment from quantum physics called the Double-Slit experiment. And of course we'll also discuss the implications and ramifications of this experiment. It's not likely something that you've stumbled across in your life. So I'm going to go slow because this is really a mind-boggling experiment of quantum physics, and the implications are all-inclusive. I mean, your entire view of reality is challenged when we look at the double-slit experiment, which has been done scores of times, if not hundreds of times. This experiment has been repeated. And as our technology and our ability to do hard science and empirical science, to even observe single electrons and photons, the experiment gets repeated again and again, and it continues to baffle scientists and philosophers and theologians and irritate the materialists. I'll tell you that. The people who believe in objective reality and that's the end of it, life is what it appears to be and nothing more, people that have devoted their lives in many cases to physics and the laws of physics and the principles of this seemingly objective, solid world, they're most challenged by the whole concept that there's more going on. It brings up the Matrix. It brings up the holographic universe that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. And for you, it may bring up all kinds of questions. So that's what we're going to address today. The bottom line is that what appears to be solid reality is both energy and mass, both wave and particle at the same time, showing characteristics of both. And what causes it to be observed as a solid particle as opposed to a wave like light or sound or radio waves, television signals broadcast through the air. That's the amazing part. It's awareness or observation that affects the nature of reality. And that's indisputable. But again, the implications are awesome. So stand by for that. We'll embark on that journey right after our opening meditation. So get comfortable in your chairs. Let's do this meditation. Sit upright, but not rigid, well balanced and centered. Close your eyes. Bring your awareness from your head, where it normally resides, down into your body. And feel your body supported by the chair or the furniture you're sitting on or the pillow. And welcome in all sense and sensation. Do not judge it, however it feels right now to be in your body. Just don't judge it as good or bad, right or wrong. Well, I felt better. Oh, I could feel worse. Just be aware of how you feel. And welcome that ability to feel, to be aware. That wakefulness. Appreciate that. You see, it's not that each of us is a human being that is aware of itself in the world, so much as we are awareness contained in a human form. Awareness is not an epiphenomena or a side effect of brain chemistry. It exists independently. Consciousness, awareness, is independent of form. All physical form exists in a cause and effect world. Awareness is cause. It is not an effect of anything. It exists fundamentally. Consciousness, awareness, is the one thing you cannot get behind. Just say to yourself, I am aware of being aware. I am conscious of being conscious. I'm getting better and better at noticing what I notice, and that I am able to notice, and that I can develop my ability to be even more conscious and to expand my awareness into areas that in the past have been largely unaware, that I have been unaware of. And you may say, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't understand that. But how could you if you're not aware of it? Just hold that thought for a moment gently in your mind. Beyond your ability to think, you could be aware of your thinking, and that awareness can grow and expand. Consider memory, times that you can't remember something that you're attempting to recall, like, where the heck did I put my car keys? And if you're not sure where you left your car keys, you may presume that you have a bad or a poor memory. You may admonish yourself and feel frustrated that you have such a bad memory. But maybe there's nothing there to remember. You see, it's quite likely that when you put your keys down, you were thinking of something else. You were feeling something else. You were unaware of putting the keys down. You did it habitually and robotically, without awareness. So you see, your inability to remember where you put your keys is not evidence of a bad memory. There's nothing there to remember. Consider that for a moment. How can you recall or remember something that you were not aware of, even though you know you did it? If you're not aware of it, how could you recall it? So when two people recall a shared incident from a few days ago or a few years ago, we were both there. Why do we have such different memories? Because the memory reflects our awareness at the time. And we were aware of different things. And we have the audacity to accuse each other of having a bad memory. Because what you recall is not what I recall. So you must have a bad memory. Because I remember what happened. You remember what you were aware of happening. And you have no recollection of what you were not aware of. You see, you are awareness. You're not what you think of yourself. You're certainly not what others think of you. You are not what you suppose other people might be thinking of you. How much of our power do we give away when we become concerned about what other people may be thinking or feeling about us? And you give all that power away because if you want that to change, you try to change them, their view, their awareness, their priorities, what they think is important. You give your power away because you need them to change. the beauty of responsibility, of being aware of yourself as awareness itself, as you retain your power to determine for yourself who you are and what you wish to aspire to become. As you expand your awareness, or some would say, raise your consciousness. Take a slow, deep breath, pulling in strength and power as you inhale. Hold for just a beat, and exhale just as slowly, and feel a deep letting go. Exhaling all the way out. Do that a second time. Nice big breath in. And exhaling, feel the letting go. Let the chair support you, the bed, the pillow, whatever. Let go. And feeling even more relaxed now. Allow your breathing to go to normal in and out. And I want you to imagine yourself outdoors on a summer eve. And if you're in a rural setting, look at the sky, all the stars. If you're in the city, imagine that you traveled to a nearby mountain, or you went out to the countryside where the skies were especially dark. And like we did when we were little kids, just sit back, lay in the grass, look at the stars. You can do that now with your eyes closed, simply by imagining. You can remember. You're aware of what you remember about having many, many times gazed at the sky. Remembering that for hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors had no idea what those stars were. Many thought they were holes in the sky dome where heaven shone through. And then there is the moon. Imagine a full moon overhead, so bright that it casts shadows. When you look at the moon, and it's as real as it could possibly be. And you remember that we have sent human beings to the moon, and they've walked on the surface and returned. And they brought with them film, still photos, and bags of rocks. And it was dusty and barren, seemingly devoid of life. We know the moon is there. We see it go through its phases every month as the shadow of the earth passes across its face. We know during a new moon, when the moon is totally black, that it's still there. Just as you know the sun exists at midnight. You're aware of that, even though you can't see it. You've heard the map is not the territory, but a symbol of it. And so when you see the moon, what do you see but light reflecting from its surface? The color changes depending on where in the sky the moon sits. Near the horizon, there's more atmosphere. The color of the moon shifts. When it's straight above you, there's less atmosphere to shine through. And so the color of the moon itself changes. But somewhere you know the moon's not changing, it's just the color. And yet light is all you see reflected from the moon. The moon itself does not emanate or radiate light. It's a reflection. A reflection off what? Particles? On the most fundamental level, the moon is molecules, atoms, and the atoms that constitute the molecules have components, electrons, protons, neutrons. And we now know that there are subatomic particles as well, quarks and muons, and it's beyond our understanding unless you're a scientist or a physicist. But I want you to consider that science has proven well over 100 years ago that particles and energy coexist. Einstein put an equal sign between the two. But particles can behave in one moment as if they're particles or little bits of matter, something solid and that exists materially, of even tinier particles, and yet in the next moment that same particle can behave like it's energy. And so when you look at the moon and admit that you only see light reflecting from the moon and call that light the moon, that there appears to be something solid that rockets can land on and human beings can walk around on. And yet the moon is also an organized field of energy. And which is more substantial? Considering the law of impermanence, that everything physical erodes, decays, rots, rusts, fades away. Nothing lasts in the material world. And yet energy cannot be created nor destroyed. Which is the true substance, the particle or the energy? And if that energy is conscious, if consciousness is energy, and that energy is conscious, if consciousness or awareness, if you prefer that word, is energy, and energy is aware, what determines whether the moon is seen as particles, bits of matter, or a field of coherent, organized energy? It's awareness or consciousness. Not necessary that you understand all the implications and ramifications of this. The point of meditating on the moon in this way is to consider that behind physical reality there's more. There's an eternal and infinite field of energy comprised of countless fields, plural, fields of energy. Like an ocean that has tides and currents and eddies and even rivers running through it. Deep in the deepest parts of the ocean are rivers or streams that run here and there. And so too, the energy field that is the universe is comprised of many currents, tides, whirlpools, waves. Indeed, what is energy but waves? Vibration, frequency, and amplitude. Just something to ponder, that the world is much more than it appears to be to our limited senses and sensations. Many animals can see beyond the limits of human vision. Many animals, even insects, can hear far beyond the limits of a human's ability to hear or to smell at a level that boggles the mind. The way a dog would track a scent days later of someone just running through a field. Days later, his old hound dog picks up the scent. And you have to bring a flower close to your nose to even discern its fragrance. How much is out there that you cannot see, cannot hear or taste or touch or smell? How much of reality are we unaware of and believe does not exist because we have no awareness of it? It's a good reason to develop our awareness with meditation, with study, and with mindfulness. To read the books, study the science, use your logic and critical thinking, and draw upon your experience. Meditate, study, and be mindful. Watch, be the watcher. Watch yourself. When you practice watching your body breathing, you develop an ability to watch your thoughts without being the thinker, and you become more aware, don't you see? And to watch your feelings without being victimized by the feeling, and learn to become more aware of what the feeling and the thought represent, what they symbolize. Thoughts and feelings are symbols of a reality that you are immersed in, and yet our awareness of it is exceedingly limited. Bring this curiosity with you back to the waking state. Just count yourself out like 1 to 3. 1 is forming the intention to return to wide awake. 2 is just taking a couple of seconds to imagine yourself rising up, floating up, drifting upward toward the waking state. And 3, open your eyes, wide awake, alert, rested, back in the room, feeling fine, rested, feeling better than before. Every day in every way, better and better. You might say, well, that's a strange meditation. I never heard anybody do a meditation like that. No, meditation is simply turning your awareness away from sense and sensation and becoming aware of the internal landscape, your thoughts, your feelings, your physical health, and your behavior, the action that you take, your perception of the world around you, and perhaps most importantly, the awareness of the previous 4, even awareness of itself. In Eastern philosophy, this is the 5th aggregate. We think, we have emotional feelings, we have a physical body that takes action in the world, and then there is the world around us. That's the first 4 aggregates. And the last is awareness itself. So to be aware of my thinking is to understand the difference, for example, between a deliberate thought and some intrusive nonsense that bubbled up from your unconscious. To be aware of your emotions, again, is to replace your obsession on the people that made you feel emotionally this way or that, or the events or circumstances, and turn within. And to expand your awareness of your feelings is to recognize them as a response, and most likely a response that has not been very well considered or even noticed. You ever hear an angry person insist they're not angry? Their face is all red, and they're yelling and screaming and threatening you. I am not angry, and if you say that again, I'm going to pop you in the face. Call me angry. And they're obviously angry. Unaware, just unaware of why we feel the way we do. And our speech and our behavior and our health and the world around us, all functions of awareness. And you can have advanced degrees and never take a class in self-awareness. Know nothing about it till now, anyway. Here you are. Thank you. Congratulate yourself for wanting to be more aware of awareness itself. Now, today, we're going to talk about the double-slit experiment. I promised you we would do that. It's really, as I indicated before the meditation, multiple experiments, scores of experiments. As our technology has evolved and our ability to do science on the quantum level. And what do we mean by quantum, by the way? What is quantum physics? What does the word quantum mean? Essentially, teeny tiny little particles is what a quantum is, or quanta. It's, I like Stephen Hawking's term, the ultimate grittiness of the universe. So a particle of sand would be huge. A particle of sand would be like a mountain on the scale of electrons and protons and neutrons and photons, which are particles or little energy packets of light. And we can actually, with electron microscopes, see some of these particles now, which is unbelievable. And we have machines that can emit single photons, 1 photon at a time. They didn't have that until recently, or one electron, a gun that shoots one electron at a time. And how did that affect the double-slit experiment? So it's been repeated countless times, and I just want to give it an overview today because of the implications around the whole idea of awareness and our course of study suggesting that awareness is fundamental and that, in fact, there's nothing more fundamental. So I put on the screen a document here that I put together. Actually, I wrote this initially. This is part of a chapter that I wrote 3 or 4 years ago. Gosh, it's getting... time is flying. Maybe it was 5 years ago or more that I wrote this for my Fearless Intelligence book. But you know how writing goes. After you're done writing your book, you turn it over to an editor, and the two of you begin to slice it and dice it and take out the extraneous stuff, and that's what happened to this passage. It never made it into the book. But I saved it because I like the graphics, and it's just a little over a single page, and I'm going to read it to you here today and call your attention to these graphics. If you're listening to the podcast, you're not going to be able to see anything, but I'll describe it as best as I can, and then if you want to go to the replay on YouTube, you'll be able to see the video. So here's the copy. An English physician and physicist, Thomas Young, conceived of his now legendary double-slit experiment in the early 1800s, like over 200 years ago, right? Assuming that the energy of light propagates like ripples in water, he directed light through 2 slits in a board. And as expected, Young observed a characteristic interference pattern. That's what this is called in this first graphic, an interference pattern, just as if he had dropped 2 pebbles into a pool of water. The rear screen reflected numerous parallel bars of light separated by dark, empty shadows, wherever the peak crusts of the light wave were canceled out by the deepest troughs. So, imagine a pool of water, or even like a baking dish. Imagine a baking dish, a shallow baking dish filled with water, and it's perfectly calm. The surface of the water is as smooth as glass. And you drop a single pebble in, you will get waves. You will see the energy of that pebble dropping into the water, radiating out from the point of impact as little waves, as ripples, concentric circles that move out, radiate out, as the energy is dissipated throughout the water. Okay? That's easy to understand. Imagine dropping simultaneously 2 pebbles into that dish of water. Each will send out concentric circles. Each of these 2 pebbles will radiate these circles in the same way. But as you can see in this double-slit experiment, as the impact of the energy coming through each slit interferes with the other, there will be places where the waves add together and get bigger, and other places where they're completely out of phase, where the peak of one wave from the first pebble corresponds with the deepest trough of the second wave, or the wave of the second pebble, in such a way that they cancel each other out. And you get no light at all. That's these black bars on the screen. And then the white fades into the black, you see. It's not just a clear line that delineates the black from the white. It's fading. It's a phase. It's relative. Okay? Because of the interference and the way these lines interfere with each other, these ripples or these waves of energy. So he just shined a light. I'm not sure. He shined a light through the double slits, and as expected, he got this interference pattern on the back screen, which we've rotated 90 degrees, and so the screen that it bounced off of is displayed slightly rotated to the right so you can see what that would look like. That's called an interference pattern, and that's what you would have expected to see. Let's continue with the copy here. However, when advances in technology allowed subsequent researchers to repeat the experiment with small particles, not light now, but particles, individual electrons fired one at a time toward the two slits, the same interference patterns were reflected. Somehow, the tiny particles of matter were acting like waves of energy. Impossibly, each individual electron was simultaneously passing through both slits to interfere with itself, and yet the full mystery is even stranger. When sensitive particle detectors, now remember, this is contemporary, so instead of shining a flashlight or a floodlight through the two slits, they're sending single photons or single electrons, like little bullets, little particles, one at a time, at this double slit. From a distance, so there's going to be some variability. You would expect many particles would bounce off and not go through the slits. Some particles would go through the upper slit, some would go through the lower slit. But wouldn't you expect to see, like the second graphic here, that instead of an interference pattern, if we used particles instead of light energy as waves, that we would just get two bars on the back wall. If the particle went through the top slit, you would see it cluster as a single bar on the top, and if the particle happened to go through the bottom slit, so too you would get a single bar on the back wall. That's certainly what you would expect if you used particles of matter like individual electrons or, again, photons, the little packets of light. And we do have that ability to shoot like a Gatling gun, to shoot one bullet at a time, one particle at a time. This is what you would expect. So when sensitive particle detectors, now here's the rub. When sensitive particle detectors, machines were set up to determine which of the two slits the electrons were actually moving through, damn, the electrons, as you would expect, behaved like particles mirroring the two slits on the rear screen. Yet the moment power to the particle detectors was switched off, the electrons again exhibited the interference pattern of waveforms. The particles, when you turn off the machine that's watching them to see which slit they go through, when you turn that machine off, they stop acting like particles and begin to act like energy, creating that interference pattern from the first graphic, as if each particle was aware of whether it was being watched. And this is termed in quantum physics the observer effect. And quantum physicists are still struggling to comprehend the consequences of mutual awareness as the inseparable connection between the observer and the observed. In other words, the primary implication of this experiment that's been repeated again and again and again, initially just shining light from a floodlight, a spotlight, a lamp. That could be a fire or a mirror reflecting light, doesn't matter. Through those two slits, we get that interference pattern. And oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. Just like waves of water would do. Right? These two separate pebbles dropped in a pool interfering with each other. But when we shoot one particle at a time, we only get that interference pattern. It only acts like energy when it's not being observed. If it is being observed by a machine or a human being somehow, if we're watching, that energy will behave like particles, and you only get the two bars, like the second graphic. And the question is, how does the particle know? How does it know? Let me take this away, this graphic. Now, I'm really anxious to discuss this with you, but in the past, we've had difficulty getting responses and participation to some of the questions that I've offered, or even just the opportunity to ask any question. I'm a little concerned that something like this is so pithy and profound and mind-boggling that none of you are going to respond. You're going to feel intimidated by it. Look, I'm intimidated by it. The scientists, the scientists who have PhDs in physics are intimidated by it. So welcome to the club. As I said before, this brings up images in my mind, anyway, of the Matrix. We talked a few weeks ago about the holodeck in Star Trek. This whole reality that they could conjure up in this big room you go into. And you can have any reality you want. You can time travel. You got a machine that is creating a hologram that you exist in. Well, who's to say we're not in a hologram? You see? And you say, well, wait a minute. I understand what you're saying about vision, seeing only reflected light, and that the map is not the territory, and the finger pointing at the moon is not the moon. And these koans and enigmatic puzzles in philosophy about such things. And the hearing and the smelling and the touching. I get all of that, except the touching part. If I could touch the moon, I would know that it's real. Well, I'm not saying it's not real. You know, in the newsletter this week, I quoted Einstein. That's why I did the particular meditation that I did about the moon. I quoted Einstein as saying, and I'm sure he said it with a kind of a chuckle, I prefer to believe the moon is actually there, not merely when I look at it. And so Einstein's struggling with this. Imagine. The guy that put the equal sign between energy and matter is blown away by what quantum physics is revealing, almost as if there's a second set of laws of physics at this subatomic level. The the laws of physics that we know from school, like Newton's laws of motion or thermodynamics or electromagnetism, that these various laws of physics get thrown into a cocked hat when you look down on a quantum level and experience repeatedly this observer effect, where the mere fact that you're observing the experiment biases the results of the experiment in countless ways. It's called observer bias. And you can see this played out in current events. Some joker, as I'm sure you've heard in the news a couple of days ago, broke into Nancy Pelosi and her husband's home, their San Francisco home. And this idiot that broke in through the back window is yelling, "Where's Nancy?" and ends up beating this 82-year-old man over the head with a hammer after the police have arrived. It's only after the police arrived that he assaults with a hammer Mr. Pelosi, 82 years old. Hits him with a hammer multiple times before the police can tackle him. Well, the left is outraged. Most Americans see this as an inevitable consequence of the political rhetoric around stolen elections, and you can't trust the vote, and Democrats eat babies, and Tom Hanks rules the world with satanic rituals, and all. People that believe this stuff and on the right promote this stuff are absolutely responsible, especially as we look at the web page and the social media. The guy that did the attack, he was totally QAnon all the way. But what does the right say about that? They say, well, this is the consequence of high crime. And, the Democrats run the big cities, so they're responsible for the crime, and crime is up now. That wouldn't have anything to do with overall poverty and income disparity and billionaires plundering the economy. No. It's just crime is up because the Democrats are in charge. And this should be a warning call to all you liberals that your policies are leading to more crime. Completely separate worldview of a single incident, don't you see? You say, oh, well, that's just rationalization. That's just the result of each side defending its position. No, these are the worldviews, the absolute realities that are a function of our awareness. What are you aware of? What are you paying attention to? That's observer bias. It exists on all levels. But on the quantum level, on the subatomic level, down here with these single electrons and protons and neutrons that you and I know very little about. We just have been told in science class that you break it all down, you get these molecules, you break the molecules down, you get atoms, and the atom has a nucleus with a proton and a neutron, and an electron in the shell spinning around it. And helium has, hydrogen has one of each, and helium has two of each, and the number of electrons and protons determines whether it's a gas or a solid or a metal or, the 100 and whatever it is now, 112 or 15 elements in the periodic table. What makes gold different from silver, from lead, is the number of electrons or protons in the molecule. But now what we're saying is we've got evidence that it's only solid when you look at it. So you look at the moon is solid. You land a rocket on it, it's solid. You walk around on it, it's solid. But when you turn away from it, for all intents and purposes, it doesn't exist. It begins to behave in measurable ways like an organized energy field. It's just a field of energy. And that whether you observe it or not, whether you look at it or not, determines whether it exists as a physical form and what type of physical form. Is it a good moon or a bad moon? Wasn't it Credence that did Bad Moon Rising? What made it a bad moon? When I was in college, somebody said to me, I was talking about the Rolling Stones and how much I liked the Stones. And the guy said, yeah, they're bad. And I said, no, they're actually quite good. He said, that's what I mean, they're bad. My first encounter with bad means good in the 60s. Bad is good. No wonder we can't get along. We're not looking at the same movie. That's my point. Everybody is watching a different movie and suffering the delusion that we're seeing the same thing, feeling the same feelings, thinking consequently the same thoughts, arriving at the same conclusions. And if yours is different than mine, I know I'm right. If yours is different, then you must be wrong. And that goes all the way to war. Now I'm going to get in an airplane with a bunch of guys in uniforms, fly halfway around the world to shoot and drop bombs on people I've never met because you have a different view of economics or government or who controls resources or whatever. The insanity of it all. I'm sorry. It's just mind-boggling to me. It always has been. Wait a minute. You want me to shoot at people I've never even met? Why? Why? And on their side of things, what do you think these Russian kids are being told when they're sent into Ukraine? What were Americans told when they went to Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Kuwait, Grenada, for God's sakes? We invaded Grenada. That was heroic. Nicaragua, El Salvador, it goes on and on and on. Let's go shoot some people we've never met. That's not a function of a high level of consciousness. We will evolve beyond it, but it's going to take some time. There's a big industry. What it's really about is money. It's enormously profitable to blow things up and rebuild them and blow them up. And if you look carefully, you'll see the same corporation that builds the weapon is also rebuilding. They're the construction people. Same company that blew it up is going to rebuild it. They profit from the weapon sale. They profit from rebuilding. And we get to 2022 and haven't figured that out yet. We should encourage people to disagree, just not be violent about it. And stop believing that there's only one right reality. And begin with the people that are closest to you. Partners, husbands, and wives. Why would you expect them? Why would you need them to agree with you? I guess this is what conservatives want. Why would you want everybody to agree on everything? And we all listen to one kind of music, and we all dance exactly the same way. And we all eat exactly the same food for the same reasons, and our priorities are all the... Why in the world would you want that? It's like going to Denny's for dinner every night. I mean, wouldn't you want some Chinese food and some Mexican food and a little variety in your life? How about some Italian tonight, I'm in the mood for some Italian food. Vive la différence! We are enriched by the distinctions as we become aware that that's what we're looking for, and that's what we do, and that indeed is who we are, a unique, what can we say, a unique perspective or view of a dynamic, ever-changing reality, and that the reality itself is a function of the way we see it, of our beliefs and our expectations. Even the moon means different things to different people. I would say there are many, many people, I couldn't guess at the number, that never look at the moon. They couldn't tell you the last time they even saw the moon or even looked into the sky. When was the last time? Again, we did it all. We all did it as kids. Laid on the grass. Well, maybe you put a blanket down, but you know what I'm saying. Or in the lawn chair and you lay back and you look at the sky and you feel your spirit soaring. Feel yourself expanding as if jetting out into this boundless space. And you wonder at what's out there. It's a little bit after noon. I'm going to open this up for conversation at this point. So if you have a question or a comment, please share that with us, especially if you've never spoken up. You can just put it in the chat box, help organize your thought. Mindy will read that and call upon you. And I'll comment on it, or you can, if you wish, open your mic and we'll go a little further with the discussion. I like to save 20, 25, even 30 minutes at the end here for this discussion. And as the class grows, and it is, especially the podcast. Have I told you guys about the podcast? The podcast, I've been doing this podcast for how long now? 13, 14 years? Since podcasts first started. I think it started in 2007, so what is that? So we've got 520 some episodes. We get 50,000 downloads a month, and the average listener is listening to 2.3 podcasts per month. So that means there's at least 20,000 subscribers. So we may get 15 or 20 people here. YouTube says we're getting 60 to 80 people there, but we have 20,000 people all over the world listening to the podcast. Maybe I'm just intimidating you further. I don't want to do that. So step up with your question about reality and consciousness and this whole idea. Could it be that when I look at the moon, it's a solid object? When I turn away from it, it's still there, but as energy, you see? This is a lot like television. It really is a lot like TV, or computers for that matter. Does your video monitor on the computer screen show you everything that the computer is doing? Of course not. It's only displaying what's relevant, what you want to be aware of. You don't need to have dials and gauges and screens and meters and displays about all kinds of other behind-the-scenes stuff your computer is doing. You just see the smallest fraction of it displayed on the screen. And so, too, television, as you know, the people are not inside your TV. My cat doesn't know that. My cats, they see a cat on TV, they think the cat's in the TV. And one of them scratched one of our TVs a few years ago, jumped up on the mantle and reached up trying to, like Alice through the looking glass, get into the TV to chase the kitty or to play with the kitty, that she saw in the television. No, those are electromagnetic signals, just energy moving through the air. Well, We have cable now, but there are still broadcasts. If you had an old-fashioned TV with a whip antenna or rabbit ears, you'd still find TV stations broadcasting off mountaintops, right? And those signals go through the air or come down your cable or into your satellite dish as electromagnetic waves, radio waves, RF. It's called radio frequency, RF. That's what that's called. It's what radio waves are. And then the TV takes that energy and displays it as pictures on the screen, just lighting up these tiny little dots, right? Thousands and thousands and thousands of little dots. Red dots, blue dots, green dots, lighting each up to a varying degree to make all the different colors. My first color computer monitor had 8 colors. That's how good that computer was at displaying color. It was 8 colors, I swear to God. Now it's like 64 million colors or something like that, because our technology has gotten better, and we're up to 4K on TV and the 6K and 8K. People are already shooting in 8K with film and stills. I don't know why. It's more resolution than the eyeball can discern. Looking at a computer monitor or a LCD, LED a plasma screen these days is more detailed than looking out the window. You just won't see it. So, observation, awareness, and then the presumptions that we make about it. This is reality. Reality is perception. And your reality is unique because your perception is unique. And if you're unaware of it, it doesn't exist. If you were not aware of where you put the keys down, of course, there's nothing to remember. And that quote that, boy, I just think at once it's so simplistic and yet so complex. At once. The quote, I'm trying to remember who said it. It was like 13th century mystic. It's very old. He said, if I were a king and did not know it, I would not be a king. You see? How much of what we know limits rather than develops or expands? We like to think of knowledge and understanding as developing and expanding what we know, but it also at the same time limits what we think we know. You see? I'll go to Melinda in just one second. I'm going to end here with a story about a farmer. Maybe you've heard this. A farmer that goes to the zoo for the very first time, and he comes upon a giraffe, and he's amazed, and he stands there looking at that giraffe for about 10 minutes. And only then does he turn on his heel, spit, and walk away saying, there ain't no such thing. That's so many of us. That's all of us some of the time, and most of us much of the time. That can't be. That can't happen. A world without war? Are you kidding, Michael? That'll never happen. A world where there's no homelessness and no poverty, and everybody has enough. Maybe not more than enough, but at least enough, like enough to eat so that they're not hungry. Children. And as children are better fed, as we eliminate poverty, the birth rate goes down, not up. We have all this confusion around this Malthusian belief that Well, a little starvation's a good thing. People die from starvation, they won't have so many kids. Exactly the opposite is true. When your children die, you have more children, not fewer children. The best form of birth control is food and education. Feed people, give them books and bread. That's what bombers are for. They should be dropping books and bread and blue jeans. You want world peace? Feed people. Give them access to the land. Break up these cartels, these giant corporations. Joe Biden actually got blamed for the infant formula shortage, and it got turned into, well, the refugees and immigrants at our border get food, but our own kids don't get food because, you know, that Joe Biden. Well, there's only like 3 or 4 companies that make infant formula, and one was poisoning the children with unsanitary conditions in their manufacturing plants. They had to close down. That was the problem. There are 4 companies. All of our meat comes from 4 companies. All of our groceries from 5 companies. All of our media from 5 companies. It's awareness. It's the lack of awareness that's the problem at the root of everything. I'm sorry, Melinda. Go ahead.
Well, I have a granddaughter that we were caught in that scramble, and the formula story is even worse than that because that company was warned. The plant was in Michigan. It was not the first time. So when you think about the depth of, I'm sorry to say, the collusion or the go ahead, you're a big corporation, we're not going to get in your way, and the lack of inspections, it was totally preventable. By the way, Patrick does have a comment, and I wanted to just thank you for that insightful meditation, drawing our attention to what we are not focused on, because I had left a pot of water boiling on the stove. So thank you for that. And I pass over to Patrick. That was a great meditation and a great talk.
Thank you. Patrick.
Hey, Michael. Thank you, Melinda. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, fine, man.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to pass up the opportunity here until somebody else is ready to go. So many things. First of all, I got a big treat this morning with your interview with Andrew Harvey. This book in Golden Mint.
Oh.
I don't know if you remember that one.
Yeah, Andrew's a friend. I've been interviewing him for 25 years. Doreen and I both feel very personally close to Andrew. So you went back to a podcast? Is that where you got that?
It came up on your YouTube because I've been watching your YouTube. I've been started over, and that popped up this morning. So that was really nice as I was going through Albuquerque in the early morning sunrise. That was pretty cool. So yeah, so much. And you know, I tune into higher level types of education like calculus and certain like the quantum physics. And I watched that what you've been talking about with the split experiment. I went and watched that last week with on the YouTube, and man, I'm telling you, some of the stuff I put in a few minutes, and when I get to Homer Simpson, I'm just like blah 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 blah, and I know I'm okay. I had enough. I get it. It's more than I can comprehend. But the only reason I get something from that consciousness of the atoms was from that dream I told you about last week that I had, and that stuck with me because every atom that was floating off of the Patrick body it would identify as me. And if it was me as being the one, it's just that whole concept of conscious energy.
That's right.
So that was pretty cool. And I don't know if you've caught up with that with the atom smasher in Europe there in France and Switzerland where they have that atom smasher. You know, they just redid it like last month.
The one
they
that's
haven't done it for like, yeah. I don't know if you've kept up on that. They just did it again, and it's been like 5 years since they did it, or some amount of time, because they put in like $10 billion or $1 billion, whatever number it was, of new equipment that's like the size of a building, because it had to. Once they did it the last time, it raises so many more questions. They're like, we need some bigger equipment to get these readings. So I
Yeah,
don't know if you've seen any of that.
what you're talking about are particle accelerators. And what they do is they're all different sizes, but the one at CERN, I guess, is the biggest, and it's a huge underground racetrack. I don't know how many miles it is around, but it's surrounded with electromagnets that accelerate particles. So they send this stream of high velocity particles at other particles so as to split them, to blow them up, to just like you'd throw a baseball at a baseball. And if both baseballs collided, they would blow up into pieces, and then you could study the pieces. That's as much as I know about particle accelerators, and they're
Well, they
trying
just
to.
shot they just shot it off last month after a long break, because they had installed all this new equipment to catch those smaller particles. And I don't know the results all the way. I haven't followed up with that, but that just happened last month.
Michael,
Yeah.
Jack has an interesting comment if he's ready to chime in there.
Okay, Jack.
Excuse me. Just that I'll just read my comment. That observing the experiment changes the result of the experiment suggests a much more intimate relationship with external reality than we often believe. That we usually think of the things that we're looking at as external to us.
Mm-hmm.
They're separate from us. And this is suggesting that you can't even be separate if you want to. You're intimately related to the thing you're looking at.
Yep, and that's I'm glad you brought that up, because I didn't really go to that, but we've talked a lot about no separation. Separation is an illusion of physical form. That, again, the allegory that's often used, and I know you know this, Jack, the wave on the ocean. The idea that the wave is rising up on its own and exists, in a sense, as a individual, differentiated form of the ocean. The ocean is undifferentiated, but the wave is differentiated. And so it seems to be an individual wave. It's not this wave. It's not that wave over there. Here's a bunch of waves that just collapsed on the shore, but that didn't affect these waves out here. They seem to be separated, but who's fooling who? It's still the ocean. And so, too, when the water evaporates and forms clouds, or the clouds precipitate into rain or snow, and that those drops of water become a mountain lake or dewdrop on a flower. They're all the ocean. You see, they all have an ocean body. That's the way Thich Nhat Hanh would talk about it. The cloud has an ocean body. The raindrop or snowflake has an ocean body. And so our body is the universe. We are of the universe. We are the universe. It's called Una because there's only one verse. there's only one of us here. I love saying it that way. It's really a mind-boggling. I am you, and you are me. And yes, the fact that we appear to be separate and that we have our own fingerprints and our own DNA, that is a parallel truth. But even though it seems to be in opposition to the ultimate unity of things, It is not. It's a both. Just like the double-slit experiment proves that it's not particles or waves, mass or energy, it's both. But the critical distinction is a matter of awareness. It's both only if we're aware of it. If we're not aware of it, it's energy, an ocean of energy. And again, what are the implications? What do you think, Jack? What occur to you as the implications of realizing that we are all branches of one tree or leaves on a single tree? What does that bring up for you?
That is it is the way the one expresses itself.
Yep.
The one expresses itself as multiplicity. The one expresses itself as individuality, and they're not. It's the paradox of reality. Life expresses as paradox, and there's no way around it. It's not simple. It's not reducible. It remains complex
Understandably so.
and interesting.
It is fascinating. I refer to this as the one in the many because it's a phrase that's appeared in mystical literature in many cultures for countless years. The one and the many, not the one or the many. Unity and multiplicity. And it reminds me of where we began this class last February with the idea of the Trinity, the divine Trinity, its lower correspondence in humans, the nature of three, even in geometry and trigonometry, the power of the triangle, the tripod or three-legged stool. Three is such an important word. So the one and the many must have a middle element to it. And what stands between the one and the many that allows the one to express itself, as you've explained, in a multiplicity of forms without being diminished. You see, the one does not get used up. There's nothing to use up. And yet that is a paradox, as you said. So, but it's a fun one to play with. And another way of talking about this middle element is the soul between spirit and matter, or the consciousness between the one and the many. If you want to go back to the first, anybody listening here wants to go back to the first, I think maybe 3 classes that we did, 1, 2, and 3, the very first classes we did. There's a treatment, a discussion, even a chart, a graph of the threeness of things. So it's the harmony between unity and diversity. Between the one and the many, there's harmony. There is the bothness, the intersection, the overlap of the one and the many. And that's love. That's what love is. It's consciousness. It's awareness. Awareness is love. You love something because you recognize it. You're aware of it, right?
Yeah.
You say, well, I recognize this disgusting thing and I don't love that. Well, yeah, you do. You recognize what's good about it and what's not good about it. I mean, what you would rather redeem or refine. You're starting with our own negativity and our own fears and our own hostility. Redeem that. Not the soul that needs redemption. It's our fear. It's our fears and our ignorance and our lack of awareness that we need to redeem. So that the awareness is really the middle element between the one and the many. Awareness stands in the middle, aware of the bothness of things, and like a bar magnet with opposite poles and yet a unified magnetic field that brings all of that into harmony. Good stuff. Thank you. Anything else?
Doesn't seem like it. I'm still puzzled by the implications of that experiment. And I wonder, you must have thought about this for quite some time to have as much clarity as you seem to possess with it. It still gives me a headache to think that our attention on something, maybe that energy that we exude actually changes the thing that is observed, if I have that right.
Yeah, it doesn't change anything, really. It's just a matter of what is observable. So we can't see energy. Our physical senses. I mean, what we're calling reality is the report from our physical senses. Let me try this. You call it reality because you see it and you hear it and you can touch it. And maybe you can taste it and maybe you can smell it. But if you can see it and touch it and maybe even hear it, you say, well, I know it exists. I'm from Missouri. I got to see it. There it is. I see it. It must exist. Well, you see a shadow. Oh, there's a shadow. Does that mean it exists? Well, as a shadow, it exists. Does that mean it has substance, that it's something real? Well, actually, no, it doesn't. It's devoid of substance. And not only is it not real, it's grossly exaggerated and distorted. That monster I saw reflected, that shadow reflected on the wall of the monster, was just really a little mouse that ran in front of the fireplace, between the fire and the wall, and cast this huge, grossly distorted, monstrous shadow of itself. And how much of what we call reality is just a phantasm of our imagination because we don't realize we're participating in the perception and interpretation of what we call reality. You and I are not seeing the same moon, though we may share a blanket and look at it together.
You know,
We don't.
what I wondered if you could clarify for me, because I might have misunderstood, was going back to the experiments. It seemed that the result of the experiment was altered by the observation of the experiment. Do I have that wrong?
No. No, that's true to say. Yes, you get when the experiment is observed by a detector. I mean, a human being can't not see a single electron and cannot determine which slit it went through. So the particles act like waves until a detector is set up to observe them going through, and then they become particles, and you only get 2 bars instead of the full interference pattern. So yeah, the results are changed depending on whether it's observed or not. But
That makes it a little clearer. It's the way the experiment is set up that makes us that makes the results appear different.
well, that's
It's still a puzzlement for me, but
we
I
don't.
need more time.
No, I don't think I think it'll always be a puzzle. Google it. Do some research on it, and you'll find an incredible debate and struggle to interpret what it means. It's not. I've never met anybody that could explain it or understand it. I did an interview just a few months ago on the radio. It's podcasting in the Wisdom School with Dr. Fred Allen Wolf, who I've known for almost 40 years. First time I interviewed him was the early 1980s. We were just kids. But he was a PhD physicist at the time and had written a couple of books. And he is, if you see the What the Bleep movie, which is also called Down the Rabbit Hole, and speaks very much to consciousness and quantum physics and this whole observer effect. He is the character, the cartoon character called Dr. Quantum, that explains the double-slit experiment. So when I interviewed him earlier this year on KPFK, I asked him about that. He struggled to explain it. he and he's Dr. Quantum, right? He was the expert. We don't know yet. It's baffling. It's not the only thing. There must be many other experiments in science and industry that are confounding us because we know so little, and yet our technology is advancing at such a rate that we're able to do crazy things like fire a single electron at a time at the double-slit. We couldn't.
There are some good videos on YouTube about the experiment. They show that they actually do it.
Yeah. Well, if it's a cartoon that you're talking about, Dr. Quantum is the superhero, the cartoon character. That's Fred Allen Wolf. And
I didn't see the cartoon one, but I did see some guys that was showing the whole thing, walking through it. He seemed to understand it more, but yeah, they don't know why it reacts that way.
Look, we're at the end of the class. Let me just say this. The only reason I even brought it to this class, the only reason I think that everyone listening can benefit to some degree from wrestling with this enigma is that central to it all is the nature of awareness. That we create reality by our perception of it. And that's not just solid objects, but what we take of this discussion, what we take of this argument, what we make of apparent differences of ethnicity or religion or custom or belief systems. And to be more aware is to be more tolerant and to embrace diversity and to bring it into your heart as well as your mind and celebrate diversity and individuality and the irony and the paradox of the apparent need of the one thing to manifest itself not only as multiplicity, but without replication or duplication. No two snowflakes alike. And we go, oh, well, that's curious, and walk away from it like that's the end of it. Wait a minute, why are there no... Why does the universe bend over backward to avoid replicating a snowflake? It's not just a matter of mathematical odds. What's going on? That's by design. We have fingerprint evidence and DNA proof of our uniqueness. Why does the universe do that? The one needs the many as much as the many needs the one. There is no bar magnet that only has one polarity to it. If you break a bar magnet in half, you have two bar magnets. That which exists has to have a polar opposite. And that's part of the way the universe expresses itself. And it will make us so much more tolerant, so much more compassionate, forgiving, loving, harmonious, so much more at peace, what I call the power of tranquility. Might not think peace is powerful, but there is no power greater than peace and love and harmony. And hey, everything's okay other than your fear. Born of confusion, I don't mean your fear as opposed to me not having fear. Our fears, our unawareness. The antidote is to wake up over and over again. That's why we meditate. That's why we study. That's why we're mindful throughout our waking day, to look around wide-eyed. Use beginner's mind like a little kid when everything was new and everything was far out and wondrous and wonderful. And my God, breathe that into every day, into every waking moment of every day. I want to know more. I want to see more. I want to understand more. Not, I'm going to use knowledge to attain some level of understanding where I can dismiss everything else that's wrong. You see? Forget wrong. Forget judging. And I know somebody could make a case that we need to judge sometimes. I wouldn't even disagree with that. But take the point for what it is. There's really only one thing going on here. Thank you. Thank you, friends, for being here. I appreciate it so much. Namaste, aloha, salam. Please unmute, say goodbye to your friends, and join us next week.
Aloha.
Goodbye.
Thank you for
Thank
coming.
you.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Melinda.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks.
Thank you, Melinda. Bye-bye.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome. Thank all of you for being here. Shanti, shanti, shanti.